Hello guys, welcome back to my channel, Ebby Pattern Drafts. We'll be looking at the essential tools needed to start your sewing and pattern drafting. So this is going to be a very short one, but it's going to be very helpful to you as a beginner. So these tools are actually a must-have because they are everyday tools that you'll be using while you're sewing. So the first on my list is a sewing machine. I recommend the Singer heavy duty machine for beginners. Provided you have the right tools, the right sewing footer, and the right needle, you can achieve a whole lot with this sewing machine. You see these footers? They will make your sewing a whole lot easier. When I was talking about the sewing machine, I made reference to using the right footers for your sewing. And these footers actually depend on the kind of style or the kind of fabric you're working with. On this video, I might not be able to look into each of these footers. I probably will make a separate video explaining what each of these footers do and where you can get it from, how much they're going for, so that you're going to understand the importance of having the right sewing footers while you're sewing. So for example, this one here is a zip footer. If you look beneath this footer, you'll see that there's a groove on this footer beneath it. This groove is actually meant to accommodate the zip teeth, the teeth of the zip, so that when you're sewing, you would not be sewing right on the teeth of the zip, because of course if you sew on the teeth of the zip, you will not be able to zip up the dress. So this footer actually helps you in attaching your zip to your dress in such an easy way. There are other footers that are actually meant for zip, but it depends on the kind of zip you're working with. For example, this one is also meant for sewing in a zip, but majorly for invisible zips. So it totally depends on the kind of, there are different types of zip that you'll be working with. So it just depends on how big the teeth of the zip is. When I say teeth of the zip, this is what I mean. So for example, this one is an invisible zip. If you look at the teeth of this zip, they actually have different sizes. This one, for example, is bigger than this one. So if you're working with your zip footers, you would want to do well to work with the exact footer that would be appropriate for this size of zip. This is another type of zip. This one has a much wider teeth. This is what I mean by the teeth. This is what I mean by the teeth of the zip. So this is wider than the rest. So obviously you'll be working with a footer, a zip footer that this zip will fit into in the best way, and it totally will make your sewing a whole lot easier. Your sewing will come out in a more professional way. Trust me when I tell you that when you work with the right machine footers and the right machine needles, you would not miss it. Other kind of footers that you'll be working with, for example, is this one. This is the button footer. Is used to sew in the button to your dress. So like I said, I'm going to make a separate video on how to use these footers correctly. So you're going to be placing the button beneath this. You'll be sewing it right into your dress. This one is to sew the buttonhole, where the hole where you would insert the button on your dress. This one is used to sew the buttonhole. So it's called the buttonhole footer. This one is gathers footer. You want to sew gathers. Instead of you doing it the manual method, this footer makes your job easier. You just install this footer right to the machine. You have the gathers sewn rightly on your fabric. So like I said earlier, they work with different fabric weights. So it totally depends on the weight of the fabric. And you can, this, I was lucky to have this footer set because they actually sell these footers individually. It comes in different designs, but for example, you might see the Gada's footer in a different design, but it does the same job as this. So, and they sell it individually, so it's not like it's packed like the way this one is. So you can actually get them, separately. Well, the only difference is it might be more expensive because by the time you buy these footers separately, you might be spending more. But come on, you're actually trying to make your work easier, so it's actually worth it. Other footers that you might be working with is your Teflon footer. This one works with leather fabric. And there are a whole lot of other footers apart from this. This one, if you want to sew in your bias, call it a bias, tape bias footer. When I say bias, this is what I mean. This is what I mean. You want to sew in this bias. You see some dresses that this is what we call bias. You see the dresses and you see that at the edge of the dress, there's a different color of fabric sewn at the edge, and you wonder, and it's so neat, and you wonder how it was sewn, because if you do it manually, it might not come out in a professional way. So what designers use is the bias footer. So what they do is to put in this bias right into this groove here, into the space here, insert it, and put this right on the machine. And while they sew, the bias goes through this opening here, and goes backwards. So when I make a video on this footers, you're going to see how to use this bias footer. The next on my list is your sewing needles. I already made mention of that. So these are different. This is a regular sewing needle, and it's you have to look at the size. You see, these sizes work with different fabric weights, just like the machine footers do. So this, you see some needles that have 110, like this one has 110/18. So it works with a medium weight fabric. So you see some that are 100 slash 14 or 100, like this is 100/16, and this one is 90/14. So this is for a lighter weight fabric. So you see this needle here, this one is actually a heavy duty needle. As you can see, it's meant for Singer machines, but you can use it for other machines. But this will work well with the sewing machine, my Singer heavy duty machine. So I actually carry these needles with proper care. My students, I don't even allow them touch this needle. As a matter of fact, you see, these needles are like one of the most essential tools I have when it comes to sewing. Because, for example, I saw a designer trying to sew a stretchy fabric. So she didn't know that you have to use the right needle. So she was using this regular needle to sew a stretchy fabric, and it was skipping. She was frustrated. So that's why I decided to do this video, because I know most as a beginner you might not be aware of the kind of tools that you need that will make your sewing a whole lot easier. So these needles, they actually function for different things. This one is for denim. That's, you want to sew your jeans. So this one is for denim. You want to sew your jeans. This needle is the perfect needle for sewing in a denim. So it depends on the weight of the fabric, how thick the fabric is. There are other needles that are meant for stretchy fabric. I used to use this heavy duty needle to sew in stretchy fabrics, and it sews perfectly well. This is for leather fabric. So you have to look at what fabric are you working with. You want to make a dress, you look at the fabric you're going to work with, and look at the needle that is right for that particular fabric. If it's a lightweight fabric, you probably will be using a smaller numbered needle, like the 90/14, 90/14. That's what you'll be working with, 90/14 for a lightweight fabric. And if you're going to be working with a medium weight fabric, you probably will be using 100/16. And if you're working with a more thicker fabric, you'll be using 110/18. And there are other fabrics that are way much thicker than other kinds of fabric as well. That is where this one comes in. I got this one for thicker fabrics. This, if you look at this needle, it's thicker than the rest. If you feel it, you notice that it's thicker. So you want to work with the right perfect needle to make your sewing easy. So this one is called the twin needle. You see some stars, and it comes with different width. This width is wider than this width, and this width is wider than this width. This one also is a different width. So what they basically do is what you basically use this twin needle for. You see some dresses and you want to make double stitch. Instead of you sewing the first stitch and going back again to run another stitch by the side, this twin needle will do the job for you. So while you're sewing, it's sewing a double stitch at the same time. So isn't that amazing? It makes your work easier and even makes it more accurate, because you might want to sew the first stitch, and when you're trying to sew the second stitch, you might not get the measurements correctly. I mean the width on every part correctly, but this eliminates that error for you. So this needle here, this one is meant for sewing in beads to your fabric. So you want to make a dress and you're going to be working with some kind of beads. So it's actually a very thin needle. You can see it is a thin needle. So because there are some needles that are because there are some beads that are very tiny. I mean the holes of the needle the holes of the beads are very tiny. So you work with the right needle, because if you use the regular hand needle, you might not be able to pass in through those beads. So this is a perfect needle for such kind of beads. So the next on my list are your sewing needles. Trust me, if you work with the right needle, the right footer, the right needle, your sewing will come out in a more professional way. And apart from that, it's going to make your job easier. I met a woman, a designer rather, and she was struggling to sew a stretch fabric. She was frustrated because she was trying to use the regular needle, which is this one. She was trying to use the regular needle to sew a stretch fabric. So she felt frustrated because while she tried to make the stitch, she had skips. The thread was skipping, wasn't going through the fabric well. So she wasn't having a neat stitch. She had skips on her stitch, and the only thing she needed to do was just to use the right needle, just to change her needle to fit into the right kind of fabric that she was working with. So that was unknown to her, and that's the reason why I decided to do this video, because I found out that even people that are already sewing, most of them don't know the right tools to work with to make their sewing easier and look more professional. So this needle here is a heavy duty needle. As you can see, it's from Singer. I also got it from Amazon. As you can see, it's also from Singer, and I also got it from Amazon. So it's heavy duty because it works with different kinds of fabric, delicate fabric. I mean, fabrics that your regular needle would not sew. So you see this one, as you can see, it's meant for denim fabric. That's you want to sew jeans. This needle is the right needle to use. The heavy duty one sews the stretch fabric well because I've used it to sew stretch fabric and it worked well. But there's actually another needle that is specifically meant for sewing that is specifically meant for sewing your stretchy fabrics. That is specifically meant for sewing in your stretchy fabric. While this one here is meant for sewing your leather. It's meant for sewing in your leather. So if you look closely, you see that this one, the one for sewing in your leather is 90/14, 90/14. So you need to look at the size. That's the size of the needle. So the smaller the number, the lighter the fabric. The smaller the number, the lighter the needle as well, because the needle will not be as thick. If you're working with a lightweight fabric, you wouldn't use a thick needle because it will be giving you punctures that you don't want on your fabric. So when you're working with a lightweight fabric, use the smaller numbered size like 90/14, just like for leather. For denim is a bit thicker. It's medium size. It's medium weight. So you can work with 116. And for the thicker fabrics, you can work with 110/18. There are also other thicker needles that will do well to work. There are also other thicker needles. Like this one is thicker than the heavy duty one, and it's actually meant for sewing in thick fabric. Maybe you're trying to join thick fabrics together. Do well to use a needle that works well with thick fabric. If you look at this one, the size says 21, so it's actually bigger than the size 18 that I just showed you. So it's way thicker. It works for thick fabric, so you don't use this one for a lightweight fabric. This one is called a twin needle. These ones, they are all twin needles, and they come in different widths. So basically, what you use this twin needle for is to make double stitches, double straight stitches. You look at some dresses, you want to make double stitch on it, and if you want to do it the manual way, it might not come out accurate or in a professional way. So that's is what this needle is meant for. If you do it the manual way, let's assume you sew the first stitch, you want to sew the second stitch. There's every tendency that the stitch might not be straight. The next stitch you want to make the distance from the first stitch might not be accurate all through. So this needle just helps you with all of that. It eliminates inaccuracies with making double stitches, and they've made it in such a way that it comes with different widths. So if you're going to sew, for example, you want it to be half-inch distance from each other, this one can work well, or there are even wider ones. So just do well to go to a fabric store or a sewing tool store where they sell sewing tools and ask them that you want a twin needle, and they will give you one. And if you don't have anyone around you, you can actually go to Amazon and you see all those needles are there. I actually got this ones from Amazon as well. So this one is meant for sewing in your bead. You want to bead your dress. There are some beads that are very tiny that the regular needles will not go in through the eyes of the bead. This needle will work well for you when it comes to such beads, those tiny beads. I've worked with some tiny beads and I want to bead the dress, and this was very handy. This was very useful. Next on my list is your scissors. Yes, your cutting scissors. So I have I have different scissors and they are meant for different things. This one I use it to cut my pattern paper. So it's meant for only pattern papers. While I use this one to cut my fabric, I use this one to cut threads while I'm sewing. So while I'm sewing, instead of me using these bigger ones and it looks like I'm working with something too big, it actually slows down my speed when it comes to sewing. So this one is very handy for me. So I just, chop off the needle while I am sewing. So it's always beside my sewing machine. While those ones are when I want to cut my fabric or I want to cut my pattern paper, I use that. This one is called a zigzag scissors. There are some fabrics that you don't need the overlock machine. There are some fabrics that don't need you to overlock the edges. When I say overlock, I mean, there are some fabrics when you work with them, the fabrics are made of threads. And if you don't do something to the edges of the fabric, they tend to loosen out. So not all fabrics behave that way. Not all fabrics behave that way. So if you're working with a fabric that doesn't loosen out, you can use these decorative scissors to make the edges look in a zigzag way, and it actually comes out really beautiful. This is called a seam ripper. Sometimes you might be making a stitch, you might be sewing in your dress, and you tend to you stitch in the wrong sides together, or you notice that that stitch is not really neat as you would want it to be. This seam ripper is what you use to rip off the seam, the stitch. You use it to rip it off. So instead of you using a blade or a scissors that can damage your fabric, you use a seam ripper, which makes your job a whole lot easier. Next on my list is a sketchbook. Next on my list is a sketchbook. Next on my list is a measurement book and a sketch book. You see, this book is, in short, is the first thing you need when you want to sew a dress. I said that because when you take your measurements, you need to, record the measurement somewhere. If you have a notepad, good for you. But for me, I always like to use my hand because my hand works well with my head. So when I want to sketch a particular design, I use my book, my sketchbook. I just sketch out. It could be a rough sketch. I just sketch out the design, or maybe I'm trying to create a design. I sketch it out in a rough form. Try to understand what the style would, how it would look and how I want it to come out. When I'm done with that, that would guide me to know the types of measurements that is needed for that particular style. So I might be looking at a picture and I see a dress on social media and I'm like, okay, I like this style. So first of all, I try to sketch out the style on my book, on my sketchbook, and as soon as I'm done sketching, I go ahead to write out all the measurements that is needed for that particular style and that design, because I don't need all measurements. I just need to work with the measurements that is needed for that particular style. For example, this I sketched this style. I was trying to create a style. So this is actually my own design. I was trying to create this style, and if you can see it closely, I actually wrote the kind of fabric I want to use. Fabric could be a linen, fabric a brocade, or a rayon fabric. So I noted the kind of fabric I want to work with. I noted that this fabric could be a linen fabric or a brocade fabric. So that would guide me also in knowing the type of needle I'm going to work with, the type of sewing machine foot that I'm going to work with, and also sketching it out like this guides me in knowing the types of measurements I need to use when it comes to making this style. So now looking at this, I know I'm going to need my full length measurements, which is a vertical measurement. This is the shoulder point. I know that I have to take the full length of the dress. I also know that this style, there's a cut at the waist region. I need to take the measurement of that shoulder to waist measurement, and also know where exactly I want the cut to be positioned at. I know that this dress is going to come with a sleeve. I now have to measure the length of the sleeve, the full length of the sleeve. Then I can see the neck, the shape of the neck. I know that I have to measure from the shoulder to where I want the deepness of this neck to get to. So basically, I know this is also a dart. I know that I need to measure my shoulder to nipple point, which is where the dart, this is called a shoulder dart. So basically this, I know that this dress, also this is the back of the dress, how I want the back to look like. So I've already indicated that I want the zip to be positioned at the center back. So there are some dresses that you see the zip is at the side, but this here I've indicated that this dress, the zip is going to be at the center back. I also know that I need to take my shoulder to waist measurement for the back. I also know that I need to measure the full length of the back, and also the neck width, how I want the neck to be wide on me or on the person I'm going to make this dress for. So basically, that's why you need to sketch. It's very important. I know some people don't know how to draw. So if you don't know how to draw, there are apps that can be helpful for you that can guide you in sketching out some of your designs. And even if you don't know how to work with apps, you can continue with just focus on pattern drafting and sewing. Not every designer or tailor knows how to. Not every designer or tailor knows how to sketch and how to draw. It's just helpful. It's just useful, and it's beneficial. So I used to sew back then in school. That's why it's useful to me now. So don't worry if you don't know how to draw. That's not a problem. You can leave that out. You can even give it to people, outsource it to people that can, help you replicate what the ideas you have in your head. And if you can't even do that, then just continue with pattern drafting and sewing. So that being said, the next on my list is the curves and your rulers. So that being said, the next on my list is your French curves, and I have different ones here. This is a French curve used for making curves around your armhole, your neck region, basically anywhere that requires a curve. This one, so depending on the kind of curve you want to achieve. This is a hip curve, because the hip is not as curvy as the armhole or the neck. So that's why if you notice, this hip curve is slightly curved. The curve is not as deep, as the French curve. So this one is all-purpose curve. It's a ruler and a curve together. The inner part is a curve, a French curve, while the side is a ruler and also like a L-shaped ruler, which makes your lines accurate and straight. So there are different types. I just went for this one. And this is a straight ruler. This is your straight ruler. This is your straight ruler. This is a short one. You would also need the long straight ruler. This one is your T-square. It makes your lines straight as well. So because if you're not working with a T-square, you might make lines like your top line, your center front line, and it might not be straight. So This T-square, that's what the T-square helps you to do. It just removes any inaccuracies with your lines. So this is your measurement tape. Well, if you don't have a measurement tape, then what are we talking about? You can't even sew. What do you want to make without a measurement? You need to take the measurement of what you want, the person you want to sew on, or yourself. So you need a measurement tape. You can't be a tailor without working with a measurement tape. Of course, everyone knows that, or rather, majority of people know that. So this one is, I got this one because when I have a client, I want to go and measure. I don't want to, be holding this all around. So this one is really handy, and, I just bring it out and voila, I measure what I need to measure. And when I'm done, I roll it back in, and it's really handy. Just throw it into my purse or into my bag, and I'm good to go. So this one, I use this one when I'm in the studio, when I'm working in. So I use this one when I'm in the studio. So the next on my list is your pattern paper. Yes, your pattern paper. You have different kinds of papers, pattern paper you can work with. They come in different width. This one is medium weight, while this one is tracing paper. I've exhausted all. I had them in much roll and I've exhausted them, but this is a sample. It's a see-through. If you look closely, you see that if you put something beneath, let's say I put this beneath, you can actually see it's a see-through. You can see what is beneath. So that's why it's called a tracing paper. It's used when you want to trace. You've done your pattern and you want to trace it out on your fabric. It's always good. But if you cannot get this, you can actually work with the normal paper. Some people use the brown pattern paper or the white one. Whichever one that you're able to get, they all work well, provided your measurement is accurate and you're working with the right tools. You are good to go. So if you're working with pattern papers, you have to use tracing wheels. Tracing wheel, we have the smooth tracing wheel and we have the tracing wheel with the spike. So I use this tracing wheel with the spike for light. So I use this tracing wheel with spikes for heavyweight fabrics. Fabrics like jeans, any thick fabric basically, because it's going to be putting some little punches on the fabric, and you don't want to use this on a lightweight fabric. Fabrics like chiffon is going to damage the fabric. So when you're working with lightweight fabrics, I recommend you use the smooth tracing wheel. And when you're working with the smooth tracing wheel, you would need your transfer paper. So this is me improvising. This is actually not the original, or rather the real transfer paper. This is not the real transfer paper. This is just me improvising. This is just a carbon paper. There's a transfer paper. They sell it on Amazon. They sell it anywhere. Just go to a store and ask that you want a fabric store or a tailoring store. Tell them you want a transfer paper. That's a tracing paper. What that one does is when you place this beneath the pattern paper, when you place it like this, your fabric will be beneath here. Your fabric will be here, while your transfer paper will be on your fabric. And make sure that the fabric is faced at the wrong side. I mean the side that will be inwards, not the side that will be, facing out. So when you place it like this, what you're going to be using is to use your tracing wheel to trace out all the patterns that you've drafted on your pattern paper. And then when you're done, you see that this would reflect those marks on your fabric, and then you can cut. So like I said, use this one that has spikes, use it for thick weight fabrics, heavy fabrics, while this one you use it for lightweight fabrics. When you're doing your patterns, when you're drafting your patterns, you want to work with a pencil and a cleaner as a beginner. You want to work with an eraser and a pencil, so that you can, correct any mistake or any error you make while you're drafting. When you're done, or when you've perfected your pattern drafting, you can advance to using markers. But basically, there's no difference. I only use these markers when I'm trying to do tutorials or teach my students, so that they can, see the marks well. But for you as a beginner, when you're drafting your own, please do well to use pencils. There are times when I'm working with a pattern paper and it's not long enough or wide enough to accommodate the style I'm trying to pattern draft. I use the paper tape to merge different pattern papers together, fresh pattern papers, and I merge it to in such a way that it accommodates whatever I am trying to draft. So I don't need to go and bring out each time every fresh pattern paper that is long enough, or go to the store to start going to get a longer one. So if I have like 3 short pattern papers and I'm trying to make a long dress, I can merge those 3 pattern papers with my paper tape and I am good to go. This is your sewing paints. So it's really good because while you're sewing, you need to secure the fabrics together so that they don't, move around, especially fabrics that are not firm. You need your paints. I know students are always tempted to just sew without using paints. Please, as a beginner, use paints. It makes your work faster and easier. Trust me. The next is the thread. The next is sewing thread. Now this sewing thread comes in different qualities. So just look out for the one that has 100% polyester sewing thread. I always go for that. There are other better ones, but I go for the best that I can find. So among the ones I can find, I will just go for the best. So you cannot sew without a sewing thread, and this is one you thread on your sewing machine. This is a hem gum. This is a tailor's chalk. While you have pattern drafted on your pattern paper, you've transferred the drafts on your fabric, you might want to use this tailor's chalk to add in your sewing allowances on your fabric. So you actually use this on your fabric. Actually, it's used on fabrics. Maybe you want to indicate where the sewing allowance is while you're sewing. You would need, and they come in different colors. You will need tailor's chalk. They actually come in different colors so that you'll be able to see the marks. If, for example, you're working on a white, so the next on my list is the hemming gum. So the last but not the least on so the last but not the least on this list is the hemming gum. You see this hem gum? See, if you want to hem the bottom of your dress or your pants, and you don't want to stress yourself trying to, stitch and blah, 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 you just go ahead and infuse your hem gum. See this hem gum, once you apply heat to the fabric, this will be positioned in between the fabric. By the time you fold the fabric, don't worry, when I'm going to show. So how you use that is to put this hem gum in between the fabric, and it will just stick. It will, the heat will turn this hem gum to like a sticky gum, and it will stick the two fabrics together. So that's that. I hope you enjoyed this video. I hope you found value. I hope you learned one or two things from this video. And don't forget to subscribe to this channel. Don't forget to like this video. Turn on your notification bell, so each time I post a video, you will be among the first people to view it.